And we are live on everything. Welcome back to Deal Flow Live, ladies and gentlemen. This is the show where we break down business deals. We look at businesses that are on market, meaning they are listed online for sale and can be purchased. And we break down our opinion on them. We talk a little bit about the value and some factors to consider, just the types of things that you would want to be thinking about if you're buying a business or selling a business. I'm one of your hosts, Brody Vinson.
And I'm your other host, Ryan Santo.
And today we've got a very special return guest on, Dhruv Kulkarni, who has, since the last time he's been on, come out of stealth mode with his company, really started banging down the doors and making stuff happen with it. So we're really excited to have you back on, Dhruv. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And for the people that are kind of hearing from you for the first time, I think a really good place to start would be just like a 10,000 foot overview of Docubridge and what led you into this, kind of some of your experience before it. What made you want to get into this? What's been some of your past experience and where are you going?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for taking the time. So to the folks that have met me before, it's good to see you again. To the folks who are new here, quick background on myself. I'm from Los Angeles originally. Los Angeles is an amazing place for private equity, funnily enough. So have experienced a lot of deals down there. I started out as an AI researcher, which basically means building small little brains that solve big problems. So things like, can I make a system that can figure out if somebody has cancer? Can I make a system that figures out if a transaction on your bank account is fraud or not? So lots of stuff like that. And after I did a few different projects in that AI research space, I built my first company in healthcare. And actually, we're going to spend a bit of time on healthcare today. But in healthcare, for those of you that are familiar, there's tons of processes that slow down small businesses. So your little guy in healthcare, small clinics, they have tons of pains when it comes to getting paid for their services, when it comes to insurances, and collecting that money. So we built software to automate a lot of those systems to make sure that these clinics can get paid for what they're doing, and to ultimately make them more successful. I as a first-time founder back then, made, of course, a lot of mistakes. As you can imagine, I'm sure, engineer, researcher, goes out there, starts a business, doesn't really know what he's doing. So I learned a lot, raised a few $1 million for that, learned a lot from that process. And then eventually, after working on that for a little bit, sold that business to a much larger healthcare company called Forta. So Forta is great. They are a much larger autism therapy startup. And that acquisition, from that, also learned a lot. After selling the business, I realized that a lot of those problems in healthcare that I noticed, which is that data is really fragmented, it's everywhere, there's lots of data in different formats. That problem is also really deeply embedded in finance, in that in finance, there's data in the web, in emails, in spreadsheets, in PowerPoint presentations, in reports. It's ultimately a lot of the data is the same, but so much time is spent on converting data from one format to another. So I've started to build Docubridge, which is an Excel plugin that automates the process of financial modeling, which to me means finding data across all these sources, extracting it directly into your format for building financial models, then linking back every cell to the data where it came from, and also letting us ask deeper and deeper questions about our data so that we can learn more about these companies that we're evaluating. So that's Docubridge. We've been scaling really fast recently. Now it's a team of 12, raised $3 million. And for anyone out there who does financial modeling, feel free to check out our website. It's docubridge.ai. We're doing lots of cool stuff on solving these problems in finance for people who want to use AI to speed up their efficiency, speed up their modeling processes. And it's awesome to be back on the show with Ryan and Brody. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's really exciting to be kind of in the thralls of what you've got going on, because there's obviously been a lot of updates. The team's grown. You've raised some more money for the company, really like come out swinging. I guess the first big question I had kind of before we get into some of these healthcare company analyses is, when you're in that process of raising money, what does that look like for you? Like when you've got this new idea, you go out and you try to seek advice and you seek people to help you with the capital to make that happen.
Yeah, I think for me, given that I had prior experience raising and had prior experience exiting the company, it was a much more streamlined process, because in the past, it was a struggle, just to be honest. This time, I already had investors that I knew that I wanted to work with. And the other interesting thing is because I work with lots of folks in finance, many of my customers are potential investors. Many of the people that I just talked to saying, hey, it could be interesting for you to use our product. They directly run, $100 million, billion-dollar funds that are potential investors in this business. So for me, sales outreach was almost equivalent to investor outreach. So for me, the investor process was a lot easier this time, given that most people I talk to have that capability and have that interest too. So this time it was a breakdown of people that I knew prior and also some of the customers that I now work with.
That's awesome. Yeah, I could see that. I could totally see you reaching out to someone to have them test the product or something, and just and even unsolicited, they might just say, "Are you looking for investors?" Just because it's a new thing and it's something that they probably can see the value in more than an investor that wouldn't be a customer. So it's a really cool kind of matching that you have. I think it'll be easy for you to continue raising money as you go. So I'm excited to jump into a couple deals. Tell us a little bit, I guess, before we go in. Obviously, you had the background in healthcare. What are some of the what's some of the stuff that you're seeing that made you want to talk healthcare tonight and be interested in looking at some deals?
Yeah, so big picture, there's a lot of trends in healthcare because healthcare is this massive, massive industry. I think in just the United States, it's $4 trillion a year. As I'm not sure of the exact number to be specific because 4 trillion is such a massive number. So naturally, there's going to be so many changes happening. There's lots of stuff happening in the insurance space when it comes to technology to automate stuff. There's lots of stuff happening in care delivery when it comes to technology as well. It was interesting. I talked to a private equity fund this morning that forces every person in its staff and also all of its portfolio companies to do little hackathons. So I see more and more adoption of people trying to force technology into not only their processes, but also their portfolio companies. So, healthcare is, I think, ripe for disruption. Healthcare, there's also a lot of excitement just in terms of arbitrage. Things like I've seen med spa roll-ups. I'm sure you guys have seen that too. There's lots of stuff around medical devices. There's staffing agencies. So, people seem to be more excited about the space. And so I think it's worth a conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I'm seeing a lot of cool stuff too. We've got I've got a connection here in town that is in the middle of doing a cryotherapy chamber. I think that's something like that. Cryo chamber roll up of like businesses that are kind of like revolutionizing oxygen therapy. And I'm seeing a lot of other stuff as well. So I'm excited to see what we come up with and what we find.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I'm super excited for this.
Let me go ahead and open up what we've got in Florida here. So we've got a lot of different stuff here in Florida, and I think we're going to look at a couple things over there in California where you're at as well.
Yeah.
Are you there right now, by the way, or are you coming out of somewhere else?
I am in San Francisco today, and it's just raining cats and dogs.
Oh, no. Sorry to hear that. We've been just dealing with a bunch of fog.
Oh, wow. Okay, interesting. So it seems like it's everywhere these days.
Yeah, just going around. Do you see anything that's looking interesting? I know I saw a med spa up here that looks pretty large. We were talking about those a second ago.
Very profitable med spa. I think it's worth taking a look.
Yeah, let's check this one out. Okay, so we've got a med spa in West Palm Beach, Florida. They're asking $6.25 million for it, and they're cash flowing $1.1 million. Right off the bat, just based on what you've seen in healthcare, Dhruv, does that feel like it's appropriately priced? Is it a little high?
So it's part of the thing there is it says it has great growth. So I actually want to see the growth before I make a judgment. If they share it in the bottom, maybe.
It doesn't look like they say much about it. Guess you'd have to see like the full financials for it.
Yeah, without seeing the growth, I'm generally a pessimist when it comes to these kinds of things. So I would say that this is a higher price. How do you guys feel about it?
I was right on the same page there with you. You're talking not quite, but nearing a 6x multiple for just over $1 million in cash flow. I don't typically see that. And that's that's probably a little overpriced for that level of cash flow. What do you think, Ryan?
I mean, we're all pretty much saying, I'm not going to try and repeat in circles what we just said. This is garbage.
Ryan's even more pessimistic.
I'm not pessimistic. I'm just like, you gave us one paragraph. Whoever's your broker, or is it a broker or a lister selling? Because that'll tell us a lot.
It looks like it is listed by someone with a brokerage of some kind or something.
No picture, just like on any sort of social media, no picture profile, putting something up. I don't trust it as far as I can look at it. I think a 6x multiple is insane for something like this. I mean, we're seeing HVACs that are going for 4x's, but they have like an 18-person staff and crazy infrastructure. I mean, I'm sure your buddy who's doing cryo roll-ups isn't going to this and being like, yeah, no, a 6x is average in this industry.
I mean, it depends on the profit too. Like if it was really high margin, it doesn't really show us much about revenue either. So we don't know what the margins are. I would want to know what the margins are. If it's running incredibly high margin, if it's a lot of returning customers, which, with this, it's probably not. Those are the types of things that drive the needle on a higher multiple.
It is West Palm Beach, so you do have to factor in the area and the general income of the area. It is higher, so perhaps that is a factor. They could be recurring.
And I would guess that there's really good growth because it was only established in 2020, and it's already doing over $1 million a year in cash flow. So, I wouldn't be surprised if there is good growth here.
Fireworks fade.
What?
Fireworks fade. They may flash and they may go, make a pretty design, but at the end of the day, they fizzle out. This could be a firework. Could
be. There's $1 million in real estate too. So I'm guessing that they're factoring that in. They've had over 10,000 patients. The positives here is they do have some seller financing worked into the deal. I would probably want to work in more than 10%, just especially because it's a newer business, only been around for about 5 years. What do you think, Drew? Anything else you're seeing in the details there? They don't give much, but
yeah, it feels as if this is like a banker doing a spray and pray, try to get the business sold type of thing, So they just list it on every site and see if they can get some leads. So I think it's really hard to evaluate this without seeing more. So I don't know, maybe it makes more sense to move on.
Yeah, let's look at another one. So we got plenty more here. Let's find something a little larger though. We've got a mobile diagnostic company. I'm going to say right off the bat, this looks very mismatched.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
That's a crazy multiple. Let's see if we can find something a little bit more reasonable. That's another med spa. What
is a med spa?
So they do like not plastic surgery. They do like Botox and stuff like that. Like lots of different treatments kind of within that.
And you don't need to be like a doctor to do that stuff. You can just be like registered or certified.
To be an owner of one, you have to have like a medical license.
No, I'm saying like to do Botox and stuff. You just need a certification. You don't need to go through any medical school.
I think it has to be just run by someone with a medical license, but I'm not sure on the exact specifics. Do you happen to know that, Drew?
I'm actually asking my good friend ChatGPT this right now.
It's a great question for ChatGPT.
Terrifying.
We've got
who's given Botox injections.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's some kind of licensing. I know you have to have the medical license to own it, like some kind of medical license. So I was just talking about
one of these. You better have somebody with a med license in your pocket, like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's a big complication to talk about here. You do have to have one. So I mean, the buyer pool for these is a little bit limited. You can't necessarily just buy one of these if you're like a common investor off the street, just trying to find a good profitable business. Or you would have to find someone who does have a medical license that's willing to partner with you on the deal somehow and carry that license kind of through that. Other option is you could buy the business. You could buy part of the business and have as a stipulation that the previous owners stay on with their license.
But realistically, how much is, if they got retirement or they're moving on to another project, you're not getting that.
It depends. I think it depends a lot on the business in particular. In one of the deals that we're working on, we actually are keeping the owner on with a license. It's a different industry, so it's not med spas that we're talking about. But it really just depends on why the owner's exiting and whether it's more just about getting the responsibility out. Sometimes you can pay them like a certain amount to carry the license, so it might not be directly tied to owner distributions or something.
I would say it's probably a bit more difficult med-wise because if something goes wrong, their licenses, it's their ass on the board that's going to get revoked if you got somebody who messes up, because the medical board does not play with that stuff.
I would tend to agree. It's probably a lot. It's probably just less common that they're going to agree to that. Any insights, like having been in the healthcare space, Dhruv?
I find it so interesting. It's like buyer must be a doctor of chiropractic. And the fact that you have to be a doctor of chiropractic and then they list this on an open platform like this makes it, to me, seem really crazy that they expect to get buyers on a platform like this. This feels like the kind of business you'd sell to, somebody given that there's such a stringent requirement on who can even buy this. So difficult to evaluate. And I would also guess that they would have to go down on the price or be flexible in seller financing to even make this work, because they have a small buyer base.
Well, chiropractors are also just like the weirdest people I've ever met. And I've met a lot of chiropractors. They're just a strange bunch. So like they tend to attract strange clientele. And like, I'll tell you this much,
his dad is a chiropractor, by the way.
A lot of my family's chiropractors. I mean, look, I've been to enough conferences, non-family, you're weird too. Like you're paying somebody to basically touch your neck and back and basically push stuff back around in your body. That's an intimate relationship. And like buying a practice and being like, hey guys, this person's going to touch you now. People are just going to be uncomfortable with that, because like they've built years of knowing their lives and how their body functions to get them to a place where they can like do stuff. So it's really difficult in that field, I feel like. And I've seen enough people take over, like even family practices. Just because you're the relative of a family practitioner does not mean that people will trust you more than they did your uncle, grandfather, dad, whatever.
And that's a really good point about like a lot of different types of medical businesses in general, because we see a lot in our deal flow that are really hard to assess and even really hard to look at seriously as an investment, because they're so like inextricably linked to the owner. Just the kind of like the patients that go there are so used to dealing with that doctor or like the owner who started it, that it's really tough to sell a business like that without that person staying on. So you really only are limited to ones who've done a great job of building themselves out of the business and having actual other doctors or physicians on staff, or in this case, other chiropractors on staff. You would have to really have a stable of chiropractors that are the ones that have those relationships with the clients here. So that would be my first question if I was looking at this. And I think that's also why, a lot of times when we're talking about over $1 million in cash flow like this business,
he's not just doing chiropractic either. He's doing a lot of other modalities and therapies in there, because an adjustment is not a crazy expensive item, and 9 times out of 10 insurance won't cover that. So they usually have to adjust pricing to make out of pocket or adjust how it looks on a billing sheet. So that's why they sell the modalities, and the adjustment is sort of an add-on to kind of wrap it into the insurance. So they're doing a lot of stuff. So you have a lot of technicians, a lot of licenses you're going to have to carry. This is basically just, I would be terribly nervous buying this. I mean, I think this is something where Docubridge would be a great help, because 9 times out of 10, family office, small family office, maybe they have an accountant, maybe they don't. If they're only seeing like a couple thousand people and it's the same couple thousand people, my dad has filing cabinets of cases from like literal paper things that he would check off with people coming into his office as late as 2012. Like he only went digital in 2013. So like if I was a chiropractor and I had a business like this, I'd probably be using Docubridge a lot, because it's a drag and drop system. It's digital. It can, you can scan in docs and it will. I mean, that's where I see this shining, where like maybe not selling your practice, but adding this in for value. Because if you can say to the new owner, hey, you're taking this over, all my documents are digital, I've scanned them, here's a detailed model of how my business has projectively done. that's another. I mean, you know, Brody, somebody has that when they come to you to sell the business. That's a value add. That's like a real estate comp.
It definitely is. I think there's certain things that you could spot within the financials. We were kind of talking off air, Dhruv and Ryan, about the little insights that you get once you dive into the financials. I think this is an interesting spot to talk about. Like, you obviously know a lot about the chiropractor industry, and we've got this one pulled up. Dhruv, I'm sure there's probably lots of patterns that you see when like you're seeing these firms analyze documents and kind of go like pour through their financial data. There's probably patterns that you see of like little red flags to look for and things, maybe specific to the healthcare industry, maybe just broad in general. What do you feel like are a couple of the things that someone should look for in the average business, and maybe even in this one specifically?
Yeah, I think the biggest things are pretty clear to the. I think the pretty clear things that people want to make obvious are the things that slap you in the face, like, hey, this is how much revenue we're making. People try to hide the stuff that they're embarrassed of, and that's what you want to look for. The core thing to understand, I think the place to start is an income statement. So you can see, here's the top line, here's the bottom line, here's how much money people pay us, and here's how much of it we keep. That margin, meaning the ratio between those two numbers, is also really important to see. And then I'd say one of the most important numbers is CAC to LTV, meaning however much money it costs me to get a customer, how much money does that customer pay me through the course of their lifetime? And that really is the engine behind most businesses. Meaning, if I dump in this much money, this is how much money comes out. That's really important to keep track of. I think people kind of take that for granted because at least with most startups, people think, we can have a high CAC, high customer acquisition cost go down. A lot of times the cost actually goes up as you get bigger. So it's, that's something to be aware of. Another interesting, metric to keep track of is ROIC, or return on invested capital. Then you can keep track of, how the business is using its money, how much of a return, the money has. Especially as an investor, it's important to keep track of these things so that you can see, is this business efficient? I like to think of businesses as like little engines where you can kind of crank a turbine or something and see, magic comes out of the machine. Usually that magic is money. There can be other types of value, of course, but if we can see how many cranks it takes to make a certain amount of money, that's, I think, the best way to analyze a business. What else does it take? Does it take, money? Does it take time? Does it take, do you need to be a doctor of chiropractic to crank this machine? Does it magically output, big numbers if you do certain things? So those are some metrics that I'd be aware of. Of course, the three statements, which is, cash flow statement, balance sheet, and income statement, those are pretty handy in analyzing businesses, but you can get a bit deeper and start comparing a business like this to others in its peer group. I can say this is called a comparables analysis. So I can look at, this chiropractic business versus like 10 other chiropractic businesses in the area, which is tricky because you may not have their data. But, comparing businesses is great. Doing a forecast of its cash flow into the future and discounting it back to the present, called a DCF. That's also pretty handy. I'm kind of, just spouting the standard stuff, but I think the engine analogy is what I've seen has worked really well, and just trying to understand businesses on a fundamental level.
I love that, man. Dhruv just did a deep dive and a nice finance 101, 102 on us right there. So that's worth clipping, I think, later on and putting out, because he just dropped some great game, and I know we both nerd out on this stuff. One thing I'd like to ask Dhruv is, because I know Docubridge, from the time that Dhruv has explained to us, Docubridge is this terribly versatile tool, and I say terribly in the best way possible.
Yeah.
Like, it'll copy stuff, it'll paste stuff, it'll make stuff readable that you couldn't read in Adobe. Like, it does so much. And I think one of the things that you'll find, and I can't speak for all chiropractors, but the ones that I know of and are aware of their businesses, record keeping's not great sometimes. And sometimes you just kind of got like, here's like the basics to not get, here's the basics for my tax stuff, but I wouldn't know how to get all this organized in a fashion where an investor or a buyer would find it. And that's something else Docubridge does really well, is it helps kind of collect all that data. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it helps you actually make those numbers.
Yeah.
So that somebody who isn't educated in that space could hopefully get their business to something where you could actually see that data.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the core thing that I notice about improving your business is once you track something, you can improve it. And until you track it, it's so hard to actually change any of these numbers because you don't even know what they are. So, it's like, let me see, how much am I spending on ads? Some people don't even know. It's like, how much return do I see on these ads? I have no idea. But once you get all this data, clean it up, put it into a model, put it in a format that makes more sense to you, then it's so much easier to start thinking about improving your business and also showing it to prospective buyers. So I definitely think that modeling is one way of doing it. And I think that's the way we've chosen to help people in taking all their data, automatically converting it into clean, formatted, linked financial models. But of course, there are other ways of doing it. Putting out charts and graphs is one we're thinking about. Using chatbots to ask questions about their data is also something that we're doing. So I think there's lots of different ways to think about this kind of stuff.
Thank God, because I was using Adobe's AI the other day. It was just the worst thing I've ever had to sit through. I mean, this thing couldn't scan 100 documents in less than like 20 minutes. And it says page 109 unreadable. I remember this because I needed page 109, and page 109 is very clear in what it says, but it's like, oops, sorry, 109 not good, and then just like completely nixed itself. And we have the unlimited account where I work, and it's like, really, Adobe? We pay how much for you to be like, nope, sorry, can't read it, sucks, dude, sorry. So something like that, when you add on, adding on the AI chatbot, adding in the graphs and stuff, that's really, I think, going to be a huge thing for small and medium businesses to kind of take back control of their own financial stuff and be able to not have to pay a bunch of people outside and maybe have one or two people internally able to manage and, really show trajectory of what they need to do rather than paying out a bunch of stuff and hoping that they're in the best interest of what they're showing you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really crazy the difference that, understanding your data makes on your business. And before I had an understanding of just, the metrics of my business, it's so hard to understand where to focus my attention. And now it's like, I can see and clearly analyze, here are all the fires running in my business. And here's exactly how hot every single one of them is. So here's the one I should focus on first. And I think that that's what every business should have. It's almost like this one big, book that just lists out, here are all the fires that are on in the business that I need to pay attention to. So that's one thing that we're trying to solve. And hopefully, more businesses start to think about this because it just means more and more of these problems get solved faster.
I love what you said in there earlier too about, when you're talking about metrics of the business, especially from an investor standpoint, if you're thinking about buying a business and it's something that's been established for a while, a lot of times you're not going to see things like the LTV of the customers or the CAC or the cost of customer acquisition within the P&L sheet or the initial analysis that you're doing. Those are things that you have to kind of dig a little bit deeper into and figure out. So it's worth asking those things, whether the business knows them already or whether you can get additional data to figure those things out and just kind of do the mathematical equation to arrive at that. Because if you have a business that has LTV or lifetime value of the customer that is far, far exceeding the cost of acquiring a customer, maybe three times cost of customer acquisition or more, maybe even, in some cases 5 to 10 times more or more, all of a sudden you have a business that if you pour gas on ads or some other particular lever that's responsible for that customer acquisition, all of a sudden you grow the business like wildfire. And particularly for something like Dhruv's company, something where you're delivering a digital product or a digital service, and the actual like mechanism of delivery is not as limited as in some service businesses, you can really make progress very quickly that way.
Yeah, I think it's amazing because more and more of these businesses, even businesses like these, they have more components of them that are not constrained by being in a physical location or by having a certain skill in your pocket. So for us, for example, we're trying to make it so everyone can have a financial analyst in their pocket whenever they want. And that person, it works 24/7 for you. I say person, I mean AI. And that AI can do all these different tasks. And the vision is that anybody who didn't have access to that financial analyst can now learn what it means to have a financial analyst for you, have that person, help you out on all of these tasks. And people who have financial analysts can have that person be amplified 10 times. So even for a business like this, I think that that's what AI brings. That's the promise of AI, where everybody can do, 10, 100 times more per different quantity. Like I'm guessing, one of the issues with a business like this is, as Ryan was saying, there's just tons and tons of these insurance things you have to deal with, paperwork, claims. Let's say we could do all that automatically, or just have an AI bot just handle all of that in the background. That would be transformational for a business like this. And I think that's where the future is with a lot of businesses like these, and even with with private equity coming in, more and more technical private equity shops that can implement solutions like these. They know what to do when they acquire a business like this. So that's my thesis. Maybe you guys have different opinions on this, but curious to hear them.
No, I mean, Drew's the reason I sleep better at night, because people like my parents who have small businesses who have had a gambit of trusting people that ended up just being kind of taking advantage of them and taking their money and just kind of running them around in circles because we didn't know any better. Driving something like this where it's like, look, you're in control no matter how big or small, you can actually understand the stuff. And when you go to buy or sell, you can be an educated part of the process, not just hope your broker is going to get the best deal. And I mean, I was laughing because I was just imagining you and Grant going up to some HVAC guy and being like, all right, we need to see your CAC and we need to see your LTV. And I feel like with Grant, you're just kind of like, well, he is pretty big. So maybe I don't know what that means, but I have an idea. Like, these guys don't know what you're talking about half the time. But if they had this thing, they'd be like, okay, pull it up. The transaction, you cut days out of it. And you're like, okay, here's the numbers back and forth. Best deal comes out. You know exactly what you bought. And also, like you said, you're a business owner. You now have control. It's like, we may dislike TurboTax because we have to, use it. But say what you will, it's a very quick and easy program, and it very effectively shows you what you have, shows you what you owe, and shows you what you're getting. Like, that's the sort of thing that I like to see in the industry, especially when it comes to AI being so bloated with stuff that isn't really helping people. This is actually going to help a lot of business owners.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's simplifying transactions and making it's helping the buyer and the seller within the transaction speak a common language. I think is really the big thing, and it's helping people make better, quicker judgments and decisions. And whenever you're in the middle of a transaction, especially if you're considering investing a significant amount of money in something, the more data that you can have to make a decision, the better. And the more you can clearly flesh that out, the better.
And you as a consultant can be like, improve this, this, and this, and then we can get to your number. And now the person knows exactly where to put their time and effort.
That's exactly right. You guys want to look at one more?
I'm totally down.
Let's do it. So you're in San Francisco, right, Dhruv?
San Francisco. I think maybe interesting to look at something in telemedicine.
Yeah, let's see if we can find something.
Pull up that Bay Area.
So we'll do San Francisco. Let's see if we can find telemedicine.
Maybe not.
I want to see somebody trying to sell their crystal shop on the medical side of biz buy sell. I do want to see.
Would you buy that?
As long as the crazy crystal person stuck with it, yeah.
Oops.
Enter an industry.
Oops.
Okay.
It looks like it's not going to let us get that granular, but let's see what we can find. Oh, the first one is telehealth.
I was about to say my favorite is Doc in a Box, but nobody knows what that means when I say that.
So we don't really have cash flow to look at. This looks like it might be a franchise.
Yep.
Yeah,
they got us.
This is a franchise.
Sons of bitches, they got us.
But as we're looking for the next one, what is it that interests you about telehealth, Dhruv? Because I think there's some good stuff to talk about there.
I like the EBITDA margin on more of these software-enabled businesses because you don't have to deal with equipment. In most cases, you don't have to deal with having necessarily like a real estate thing. I think there's a lot of that's where I see fast scalability too, because you don't have to be tied down to a location and so on. It's interesting. Okay.
Here's something interesting. Ryan, this is a home health or a home care franchise.
We actually talked to some people at the franchise expo that did one of these. Remember, it was the pink one.
Yeah,
these
are good businesses.
Yeah, these are very cool. I probably would. I mean, we had the same feeling. We're always nervous about the franchise model a little bit, but I feel like as a business, it's a really good one. Like if you can really provide this sort of care, it's immense.
Yeah, and it's established. It looks like it's doing 323,000 a year in cash flow. So you're getting this at less than a 3 times multiple. That's appropriately priced, I would say. You're not necessarily getting a steal on it at that level of cash flow, but actually, now that I'm looking, it looks like they said the cash flow is 323, but they're saying the seller's discretionary earnings is 267.
I mean, that's a good breakdown because you remember cash flow does not always mean going into the pocket. Cash flow is simply cash left. So we don't know also if the owner has tied up certain assets into the business. We don't know where which again, like Dhruv has alluded to, he likes to see that breakdown. We would see that in the breakdown, but 267, maybe I'm just not that fancy, but I think that's a good amount of money.
It looks like the 323. I think the 323 is a projection. Based on the right after that, it says projected SDE is 323. So it's
yeah, you're right.
They put the projected in the cash flow, or maybe the numbers are just coincidental. I don't know.
I mean that's fairly common. We found
we do see that a lot.
That makes sense. Interesting.
On these listings, I mean, they're always trying to make it as appealing as possible.
I think this is an owner sale, right?
And I would be curious. I mean, when they say projected, they might just mean that they haven't finished doing the 2024 numbers and that's what they expected to arrive at. So that would be a little bit of a different story. But if they're projecting that 2025 is going to finish at 323 and last year finished at 267, then, I would be going off of the 267. Interesting. Looks like they've had a valuation pre-approved and confirmed by a bank, an SBA bank. So you'd be going through this, if you were going through this with SBA financing, it looks like a lot has been done to kind of help get it in place. One thing I like about this is they provide a lot of information on this one. The owner's selling due to health and personal reasons. Always tough to see.
How many employees?
But, I mean, that's usually it's usually a pretty good reason to sell.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially if they've grown it to where it's making almost, they're cresting that $400,000 thing in a franchise, which usually those are numbers I see traditionally when I do my research in like the bigger food guys. But even then, we see a lot of that kind of trailing off as of recently. But that's very good. So they probably work pretty decently into the business if they're selling it. So you might be taking over a job in this one, but if you're passionate about it, it's a very well-paying job, and you could probably figure out how to get yourself out. 267, that's a lot of money to figure out how to get yourself out.
They've got 50 employees as well.
Oh.
I'm curious, I'm guessing a lot of those are not full-time employees at this level. They're probably putting just all of the independent contractors that they work with. But
are they selling as a remote thing, or how are they trying to offer this one? Is it like, are they trying to be like, did they put the infamous work from anywhere?
They say turnkey.
Oh, don't like that. That makes me scared.
I would just be curious what the setup of those employees looks like. Any final opinions on your end, Dhruv?
There's always something. It's funny. It's like, it looks good in the beginning, and then there's, some small detail. It's like, okay, here, team of 50. What's going on here, and then they don't have any other details on that. So it's like, okay, this is where we should focus. Let's figure out exactly who these employees are. I want to see, a payroll run or something, so I can figure out how much goes to each of these people. Let's figure out, how they're hired, how long ago they were hired. Because at least to me, at the end of the day, a business is just people, and people, during times of change, like a business being acquired, a lot of stuff can change. So if we lose, like key contractors in an acquisition, then that's very dangerous. That's a liability. I think the good part of this is, given that there's 50 of them, the liability is reduced a little bit. One of the risks that I've seen people, talk about in acquisitions like this is key man risk, which is, let's say, or key woman risk, for example, is that if you buy a business and then there's one really key player who has all of the customer connections or knows the engineering stack better than anybody else or knows something that somebody else doesn't, and that person leaves, then there's a big risk in the business. With this, it's diluted a little bit, hopefully, because there's 50 of them. But still, it makes you think like, what's going on with an operation like this that requires 50 employees? Maybe they're not employees, as you guys say, with contractors, but just something to think about.
See, Dhruv gets it. He understands it. Most people don't even consider the human capital stuff, which we did a fairly deep dive on an episode that will be released at some point. But that was we literally Saturday with Dhruv, we were talking about this exact topic. But yeah, he nails it. I mean, the key person risk, we spent like how many days of classes talking about that in our MBA, but also just the fact that you're buying a business, not the people. They can walk, but diluting it like that is you're going to be your best option in case you got some people who just decide to walk. But odds are they don't even know the owner. So you're probably going to do okay with a franchise.
It's always safest to have many clients, many employees, and many vendors, I think, in any business, because that way, when things inevitably do change, you're not going to feel it as much. If you've got 50 employees, 50 customers versus a business that has, 5 employees and 5 customers, the things change very, very, very quickly with the one that has less customers and employees. I mean, if you lose one of 5, you're talking about a completely different business, and you all of a sudden might have overpaid for it drastically as an investor. So definitely something to consider. And as kind of like a closing thought on this one in particular, one thing I noticed that Dhruv was really good at spotting on all of these is that there's always going to be some kind of skeletons in the closet. There's always something. So you should always look for that something and try to hone in on, what the thing is that might not be immediately present, that they might not want to most openly talk about, because you want to find the potential deal killers early before you spend too much time on a deal, and figure out whether they are a deal killer for you. Maybe you find out what the worst thing is that they're trying to hide, and it's not a big deal for you. And in that case, it's a deal you might want to proceed with, or maybe it's something that's a deal killer for you, and otherwise you would have spent months on it.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that point, the game, especially with acquiring businesses, is not avoiding risk, because risk is where the money is made, but it is understanding every aspect of the risk and not missing any risks, so that when you acquire the business, you know exactly what risk you're taking. In many cases, of course, the risk changes over time, and you still miss stuff. But I think the game is about figuring out what risks there could be, making sure you're comfortable with those risks, making sure they align with what you're personally, preferring in an acquisition like this. I think a lot of people miss stuff, and that's where that's where the risk is, funnily enough. It's like, I acquire this business, like the key person leaves, or I acquire this business and then some policy changes, or let's say, these customers leave. There's always some risk. I mean, of course, it's at the end of the day, it's a human thing, because your customers are people, your team is people, you as an investor are a person, your vendors are people, the people making policies are people. Everything has to do with that human element. But I think, the only way to actually know what you're getting into is to understand this from every angle possible. Just capture all of that risk possible. So that's at least the way that I think about it.
Completely agreed. And I want to say one more thing as we're kind of getting to the close here. We're getting to the top of the hour, and Ryan's got to head out here in a second.
So do you.
I've got to head out here in a second as well.
It hurts. I don't want to do this on the Dhruv day, but unfortunately things transpired this way.
But we do have one question that I want to give a quick answer to that came in on Instagram from a good friend of the show, Nick. He said, if the deal seems too good to be true, how much effort should you put into finding the potential skeletons in the closet? I want to give kind of a different spin on the answer. My answer is going to be, I think you should at the least find someone very experienced in that industry, and someone who is very experienced in financials, hopefully also in that industry. Maybe a CPA who's worked in that industry or for that industry, and then someone who's worked in the operations of that industry to give a second opinion. I think at the least you should do those 2 things, because those are going to give you the insights that you wouldn't necessarily know to look for.
And maybe one thing to add to that, if you don't mind, I think a lot more of these deals are being done on Zoom. If you're suspicious of something, or if you want to figure out something, in addition to what you've learned so far, I think you'd be surprised at how much more you learn just by going in person, meeting the seller in person, seeing the business in person, talking to the customers in person, just maybe even just sitting in the lobby of a business, if it's an in-person location, just seeing how the customers flow. So I think, going in person is a surprisingly simple, but also really deep way of understanding a business more deeply. So, always recommend that. Not even just as an acquirer, but I think, a lot of that magic has been lost since the COVID days. So, that's one recommendation from my side.
Yeah, Dhruv is the king of in-person, man. We were supposed to have Dhruv on earlier. And what was happening? Well, Dhruv was flying around the country talking to his customers and people and getting real-time feedback because he believes in that connection. He's selling a digital product, showing up on the doorstep, being like, hey, I'm here. I made this. Let me do it. So wait, are we about done now? Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have to do a continuation of this conversation because Dhruv is making big progress every time we talk to him.
That's 2 times founder, 2 times CEO, Dhruv Kulkarni of Docubridge.
And Dhruv, is LinkedIn the best place to find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's great. It's just Dhruv-Kulkarni, DHRUV-KULKARNI. And our website, docubridge.ai, is also amazing.
Check out his website. Check out Dhruv on LinkedIn, where he posts a lot about what he's doing, and you can see a lot of what he's done in the past as well, which is a lot of the things that have led up to this and kind of formed the whole package. And stay tuned for the next time we have Dhruv on. We're going to get something really interesting going. We're going to dive into the financials a little bit deeper and do some analysis, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. As always, you can find Ryan and I on LinkedIn. Brody Vinson, MBA for myself.
Ryan Santo, MBA on LinkedIn. But Brody, where else can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram and a lot of other platforms as well. Instagram and LinkedIn are the best places to message me. But until next time, Dhruv, thank you so much for coming on. And we will see you next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Thanks so much for having me. See you next Tuesday.
Awesome.